You're listening to the Product Coalition podcast with Jay Stansell. This is where product mastery happens. This is where careers are made. Welcome to the Product Coalition podcast. Let's go.
Welcome, everyone. Today we have a special guest, Joni Hoadley. Joni has over 25 years of experience in product management, from pioneering digital music to leading at Sonos. Today we're diving into Beyond Day One, crafting a high-impact onboarding experience for PMs. Joni, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to get into this session today.
Hi, Jay. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited as well.
Joni, before we jump into a little bit about you and your origin story, I'm really keen to hear from you why this topic was important for you as a podcast episode.
Well, we're going to dive right into it. But the motivation behind why this topic is something I'm so passionate about is because during my time at Sonos, I joined in the very early days. I was the very first software product manager, and I was there during a time when the company went through rapid scaling. You know, we were just doubling in size year over year, and the company had a really high bar in terms of the people that we were bringing in and our onboarding experience. And we, that focus on onboarding really stayed with me. It helped me realize that when you have a good process in place, when you've thought through what success looks like for someone before day one, then when they start in the role, they're really able to hit the ground running, and they're able to really kind of absorb the culture and integrate into the team much more quickly. And I saw this, every week I was seeing this put into practice, and it really stayed with me. And so when I left Sonos, it was something that I continued to tell everybody about. I think it's something that every company should really be paying attention to.
Joni, 25 years of experience there. Could you give us a run through of the story?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, so I've been doing this for about 25 years ago, and that means that I became a product manager during the early days of the dot-com boom era in the mid-90s, just to provide some context. So that was really, that was during the dial-up modem and Napster, ripping CD era. So the companies that I started working for as a product manager, the very first one was a company called Spinner, which was the first ever streaming music service. It was eventually acquired by America Online, and there are probably bits and pieces of it in use somewhere on, around the internet. But that was my very first experience as a product manager. And then I went on to work at a company called Music Match, which, if you're old enough and you were ripping and burning CDs, there's a really good chance that you used the Music Match Jukebox, which was my software that I was responsible for. And basically, I spent those early days bringing music to the masses during that, dial-up modem era. And it's funny because back then, we thought, like in a year or two, everybody's going to be listening to music this way. And, fast forward to today, now I feel like we're finally there. But wow, when I look back on those days, it was a very wild time. It was like the Wild West, but it was very, very exciting. And then from there, I went on to join Sonos back in 2005, which again, like I said, was very early days there. I ended up spending about 12 years of my career there. I was the very first software PM hired. One of the reasons why the team at Sonos really liked my background, besides the fact that I worked at streaming music services, is I had a lot of connections with the other music services that were emerging back then. Pandora was around, and Sirius, satellite radio. So it was a really exciting time. And I would say my through line throughout my career has definitely been that combination of music and tech. I was very fortunate to start my first PM role doing something that I'm very passionate about. And I eventually kind of became a subject matter expert on digital music. And then since that time, I left Sonos several years ago, and I, really brought that same passion that I have for building products that people love to my coaching and consulting practice. And now I work with businesses and product teams, helping them create products that their customers are going to love.
I got to ask, is music still a big part of your life?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You can't see, but I have, I continue to have a home full of Sonos products. I'm still, very proud. And that's how I listen to music today. I've got, Sonos speakers on my desk. I've got them connected to my TV. But I also have, guitars in my office, and I go to concerts all the time. So yeah, music has always held a very special place in my heart. And like I said, I would often tell people, especially in those early days at Sonos, that, I had the best job ever, because I basically woke up every day thinking about how can I help people listen to more of the music that they love. And while I wasn't out there, finding a cure for cancer, I just really felt that I was doing something that brought joy to the world. And as a product manager, I couldn't ask for anything more.
That's amazing, and I think that in itself is a good takeaway for product managers to not just be a product manager, but try and find a spot of product management in something you love or in an industry you love. And it's great to see the brand loyalty and advocacy you still have for Sonos after all of those years. That's awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
let's jump into onboarding experiences for PMs, Joni. So. Onboarding new hires, and obviously as we've gone through a downturn recently, the upturn is ahead. There's a lot of people shifting jobs into new environments, and a lot of companies, are rethinking how they hire going forward. But the onboarding piece, why is that so critical to you as a leading indicator of success in product management?
Yeah. So there are a couple of reasons why successful onboarding is so important. The first, and this is something I think I mentioned in the context of Sonos, is it really helps with that team cohesion, bringing someone new into the team. It helps integrate those new hires into the team culture, which is really important. And it also fosters collaboration and trust. And trust is one of the three major pillars in a successful onboarding plan. You need to have those relationships in place with your stakeholders, with your managers, with the leadership team, with anybody that you're managing. If you're in a management role, it's really, really important. And the other factor I think that makes onboarding so important is it gets people up to speed much more quickly. A lot of people who are managers, especially for the first time, I think tend to have somewhat unrealistic expectations of how quickly people can get onboarded and adding value as a new product manager. And if you really want that to happen, if you want your product manager delivering and adding value, within weeks of starting, then you absolutely need to have that onboarding plan in place. It really can shrink time to productivity, which I think is one of those important factors that's going to contribute to long-term success. And then there are also, there are a lot of statistics out there, a lot of research has been done that shows that successful onboarding can reduce turnover. So, you mentioned, it's a bit of a tough market right now, but companies are still onboarding, and hiring is expensive, right? It takes time, it takes money, it takes effort to hire the right people. So the last thing you want when you're a manager is to hire somebody only to have them leave after a couple of months because they didn't fit in, or they didn't know what to work on. And I've seen that time and time again. It's a big mistake that happens.
Nice. So before I get into asking you how to do it right, I'd love to know how to do it wrong. What are the common mistakes companies make when onboarding
Ooh,
product managers?
yes. Well, I would say the biggest mistake is the obvious one, which is they don't have an onboarding plan or process in place to begin with. And this happens usually I see this happen at really early stage startups where maybe you're the very first manager hired and you're reporting to the CEO. When you're at a company with, less than 25 people, there's a good chance that they're not taking time to do that onboarding planning. And if that's the case, I would encourage anyone to actually come into a new role with their own onboarding plan. I think this is actually a really great tactic to use in the interview process. So before you're even hired, I think it can show a lot of forethought and tenacity to explain to your prospective manager, hey, I've thought about how I could start strong, and this is what my 90-day plan would look like if I were to join your team. So I think when you're looking at working at a startup, it can really help to kind of take the initiative and formulate your own onboarding plan. That's better than having no onboarding plan at all. But the biggest mistake absolutely is just a complete lack of onboarding. I know in my early days, when I joined Spinner, I think I was the 9th employee hired. And, I think I was lucky. I was given a laptop and they pointed at a desk and said, all right, go figure it out. That's how it is for a lot of people these days. So if you can, really establish a good relationship with your manager and make sure that they're putting a plan together, that's going to avoid a lot of mistakes down the road. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, I would say the other big mistake I see is overwhelming new hires with too much information. So that's another common mistake that people make. I think a lot of it is, they don't necessarily think through what is the most important information that this person needs to know, and then maybe, show it in layers, let them get through the first stage, and then, then you can share more information as they, dip their toes into the water. But that, drinking from the fire hose experience, we probably have all been there before. I would say that's the other big mistake. And the reason why that is a problem for the new hire is because they often haven't yet had a chance to understand what the company mission is, what their vision is, what their priorities should be. And so they're getting all this information, but they don't know how to focus on the right thing yet. And so that's why that problem is a dangerous one. And then I would end with the third and final mistake that I see that's pretty common is not having a good enough feedback loop between the manager and the new hire. Especially nowadays, a lot of companies have evolved to kind of a flatter org structure where managers have a lot more direct reports. And it's hard, I get it. I've been there. Making time to have one-on-ones, especially with a needy, new hire who's going to ask a lot of questions. I know as a manager, it's easy to kind of put off having those kind of sessions, but it's really helpful for everybody involved to get that feedback and have that loop in place, because number one, you want to make sure that the new hire is, that they're understanding everything that's being asked of them, that you're aligned on what success looks like. And then I think the other reason why that lack of feedback is a mistake is because it's a missed opportunity to improve the onboarding experience. So I really like to think of onboarding like a product. Of course, I'm a product manager at heart, so I can't help but look at things like a product manager would. But I think onboarding as an experience is something that companies should treat like a product. And those feedback loops, right? You want to make sure you're understanding your customers. You want to make sure that you're iterating and improving. And in this case, I would say your customer is your new hire, and you want to make sure that you're serving them. So those are the three mistakes that I see happening the most.
Nice. I think I like the analogy there of thinking about it as a product and all of the things you need to or could be doing during an onboarding experience, thinking of them as features of the onboarding
Right.
product means you then start to prioritize and work out what's important and not in the first 30, 60, 90 days. Um, uh, what I also appreciate is that during this process, you've also got in amongst all of your product managers in that flat structure, you've got one that's more nervous and less knowledgeable than others. And at the same time, we know as product managers, we need to build the trust, as you were saying, and that takes time. But acquiring the knowledge can be structured and can be well thought through. I'm keen to know what correlations have you seen between like these bad practices and then how product managers perform in terms of either mistakes they've made or they've jumped the gun on assuming mission or strategy incorrectly or interpreting it wrong. What from the trenches have you seen of as where these bad practices have really unfortunately happened?
Sure. Well, I'm thinking about, a couple of people that I know that reached out to me for help who, unfortunately they reached out to me after they'd already started rather than before where I could kind of coach them on like here's what you should be thinking about on day one and beyond. I would say that what I've seen new hires do that really sets them up for failure pretty quickly is they jump in and they immediately take their marching orders from their manager and immediately start going into execution mode without really making sure that they understand kind of the why, the strategy behind the product, the strategy behind, why is this feature that you want me to start implementing on day two? Why does this matter? Right. And so what I see is a lot of, especially newer, younger, less experienced product managers will just take that and run with it. And then everybody on the team's looking at this person like, why are they coming to us with this? We don't understand why all of a sudden this person is bringing this to us. And as the new hire, you don't understand the context and the strategy, so you cannot evangelize it, right? And I think that immediately puts you on the wrong foot with your team, and that's a really dangerous slope to start going down. I believe that it's a challenge as a new hire because everybody wants you to come in and usually they've been like waiting for months to fill this role. So there's a laundry list of things that they want you to be working on, but it really helps if you can kind of hit the brakes and say, hey, let's bring me up to speed on the vision and the strategy so I can really understand what our mission is here. I also recommend during those first 30 days that you take time to really talk to a wide range of people on your team, stakeholders, customer care, especially, I think is a really important group that you should be engaging with. And one of my favorite questions to ask as a new hire is, what keeps you up at night, right? Like help get into the heads and the minds of your partners in the company and figure out, what are they struggling with, and start to identify ways that you might be able to collaborate them down the road. And that can go a long way towards building trust so that when you are ready to start executing, you've got that relationship, that foundation in place that can really, really help. But yeah, I've seen way too many product managers come in and they want to make an impact so fast that they do it without taking time to really understand what the strategy is. And I feel like it's happening now, maybe more than before, because the job market is so tough. And I do see a lot of fear that is driving people. They feel the need to perform and make an impact as early as possible so that if the company goes through layoffs, they won't be the first one let go, right? I can see, you can kind of see the wheels turning in that regard, that there is a lot of fear when people start a new role. But I would argue that's all the more reason to, take your time and make sure that you're grasping, the mission, the vision, the priorities, what the strategies are, what is the North Star for the company. It's really important to understand that. And then you can make good decisions moving forward in terms of, what kind of features you work on.
Nice. I appreciate as well that we've seen downsizing across all markets here. So in the larger companies, the HR teams have also been downsized. So for people coming into these new roles, they're not only necessarily replacing someone that was there before, they may actually be replacing 2 or 3 roles that have now
Right.
been amalgamated. So I'm keen to hear then, Joni, you're living, breathing, onboarding day in, day out. What are the best practices here? What are the cheat sheets and the artifacts you're using that you find are scalable and repeatable to make this less of a challenge for organizations
Right.
and individuals?
So one of the things that I've developed is something that I call the PM role clarity canvas. And I've designed that. It's, if you've used a business model canvas or something like that before, it's fairly similar. And I think you have it on the screen there. That's awesome. But that essentially is a tool for both the manager and the individual contributor to really tease apart what is the most important information that you as the new hire need to know. And I think having a document like this, it can be really simple, but as the manager, I think it's really important for you to kind of take a few minutes to think about, what does success for this person look like? What are the KPIs that we're going to be wanting to measure over time? Who are the most important people for that person to speak with during the first couple of weeks in the role? There's some obvious things that you also want to include, like what are the tools, what are the resources that they're going to need. If you're a product manager working on a specific product, you probably are going to have, wiki pages, Confluence pages, that kind of thing to provide to the product managers that they can read and get onboarded more easily. And then, I like to kind of map out sort of that 90-day roadmap for success for the individual contributor who's starting in that new role, and identify, like, hey, here's some quick wins for you to focus on during your first month. And then, here's what you should be thinking about for your next 30 days, that 60-day period and beyond. I find that, like I said, if you can spend a few moments filling this out as the manager, then when your new hire starts, you can walk through this with them and know that they're going to, be able to go spend the next couple of days independently, working on the right set of things. So this is a good starting point. I would say this is a good thing to start with. As a manager, I think one of the most important things that you can do, though, is to really make sure that your new hire understands the company's mission, vision, values, right? That is so key. If you're at a smaller company, that might just be the manager walking you through that information, maybe sharing some decks that they've developed. I think one of the most helpful type of artifacts that you can share with a new hire is, like, if you have a board of directors deck or presentation, you can walk them through that. You don't necessarily have to create anything new. It's just pulling the right pieces of information together. And then if you're at a bigger company, if you're at a much larger company, they tend to have onboarding practices where they will bring in like a cohort. You're going to be part of a group of other not product managers necessarily, but new hires. And you may sit through a presentation that is delivered by the CEO or the founder of the company, who's going to share with you, like, here's how we got started. Here are our values, right? If your company is doing that, that's great. That is a wonderful thing. But if they're not, then you want to take time as the manager to make sure that your new hire really understands that, because, right, as product managers, we need to be able to start with the why, right? Why is what I'm working on so important? How does this connect to the company's North Star. So that I think is, it's so easy for us to just have the person sit down, have them hop into Slack, join all the channels and see all the noise. But that goes back to those problems that we spoke about earlier. That information overload and overwhelm is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. So if you can start by, hey, let's sit down and make sure you understand kind of the mission and the vision behind what we're doing, that can go such a long way towards setting someone up for success.
Nice. I see the value of this canvas for both the hiring manager and the new employee, because it acts as an artifact that's common to both. And
Yes.
what I really like about this as well is that there's things like top three. There's a
Right.
limits being put in place,
Yes.
so it doesn't just become a dumping ground of everything the company wants to achieve over 12 months or 3 years or whatever it may be. Can I ask Joni, along those lines, what are some wrong ways to use this canvas?
Well, I would say you just hit on one, right? Which is kind of using it as a dumping ground and putting too much in there. That is something that could go wrong very quickly. The 30, 60, 90-day portion of this, I think that's another area where I think that's where someone, as the manager, could overload the new hire with things that, maybe need to be sequenced a bit more strategically. I think that the first 30 days really should be about building trust and relationships with the people that you're working with and learning. Really, you're just taking in all the information you can and you're building relationships. The 60-day period is when I really like to encourage people to use that time to establish their credibility, right? By the end of your 60 days, you should have some quick wins under your belt. By the end of that, second month, you should be comfortable enough and knowledgeable enough about the product and how things work at the company that you can have an impact and show establish your credibility with your team as, hey, you made the right hire in me. I'm here, I'm adding value. And that should start showing up within that second month that you're in that role. So I think that sequencing, that's a hard word to say, sequencing of what the new hire is doing over those 90 days is really important. So if you put the wrong thing in the first 30 days, they're going to get off on the wrong foot. That's probably the biggest mistake I think someone could make here. The other thing I think is not thinking through who the new hire should be speaking to. A lot of times as a manager, you might think, oh yeah, these are the 5 people that they should talk to. I like to work around that by asking the people that I am talking to in those first early days, who else would you recommend I speak with? And I guarantee any new hire that asks that question is going to uncover gold, because they're going to realize that there are some people in the company that might be under the radar, right? Like the leadership team might not necessarily be thinking, hey, that person knows a lot about how something gets done. But, let's face it, every company has those people that are like the glue. And if you can figure out who they are, they're going to help you be more successful as well. So you want to do a little bit of detective work. So I would say as the new hire, you want to take that list that's on the canvas of, here are the people you should talk to, and you want to kind of make that your own and add to it based on what you're learning as you go along.
Nice. I like the sequencing reflects a good old-fashioned roadmap.
Yeah, right.
I'm thinking about day one when you were talking about those first 5 people. Joni, what are your thoughts on when is the right time for the new employee to have those sessions with them first 5 people? Is it day 1, day 3, week 2? When's the employee most likely to not make the most of time with these people?
Right.
Is there a too soon option in there?
Well, I don't think there is a too soon option. I do believe that, usually your first day one really is, I would say more like administrative at most companies where you're getting set up with all your various accounts. You might have a one-on-one with your manager. By day 2 and day 3, you should at least have an idea of these are the people that I should be meeting with. So I think that by the end of day 2 or day 3, you should have your target list of people that you want to meet with. And then you should proceed to try to meet with as many of them as you can within the first 2 weeks. And, it's a challenge, especially for those of us working remotely across time zones, right? It might take you a little while to get through to meeting with everybody, but I think, using the new card, hey, I'm the new hire. I'd really like to spend 20 minutes with you chatting. That goes a long way. I think most people are genuinely interested in helping new hires be successful. So if you take advantage of the fact that, hey, I just started and I'd love to meet with you, most people are going to go ahead and accept your meeting invite. So I would try to front load as many of those into the first 2 weeks as possible. But if you can't, better to do it later than never, right? And I think the other thing that I would encourage people to do is, don't leave it at just like, okay, I met with these 10 people, I'm done. Those are probably 10 people that you want to be syncing with on a quarterly basis, if not more frequently, to maintain and nurture those relationships.
Nice. I think what I'm hearing here is particularly for the senior roles and for the list of people who are maybe even more senior than the role you're stepping into, it's actually on the hiring manager to pre-organize those meetings and get them in the diaries before the person
Right.
starts, because getting a session with a CEO, for instance, might take a
Right.
few months, if never. But if you can prep for that as a hiring manager, then you're probably setting your employee up for success.
Exactly. And I do think, again, if you're working at a company like Meta, you're probably not going to get a meeting with Zuckerberg. But if you're working at a startup with, anywhere from 10 to 500 people, you absolutely should be asking your manager to set time up with the CEO, the founders. Those are really good people for you to talk to so you can understand, what matters to them. And then you can use that conversation to come back to your manager and make sure that there's alignment there. Because I think one of the things that I have seen is what the manager suspects or what the manager believes is important might actually be different from what the CEO or the founder tells you. And so as the product manager, that might put you in a bit of a tough situation where you're like, I'm getting conflicting information here. That happens a lot though, right? I think that is a great insight to have though, so that when you do sit down with your manager, you can say, hey, I'm curious, when I talked to the manager, the CEO, this is what they said, but that's a little bit different than what I'm hearing from you. Like, can we discuss this? I think those early days, there is a little bit more psychological safety that is there for new hires to, ask questions and not necessarily directly challenge your manager, but to bring these things to light, to have meaningful conversations, because let's face it, if you're hiring a product manager, you want them to help build better products and grow the company. And so it's really important that everybody's aligned. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Joni, I'm going to give you a couple of extremes rather than the mainstream. When people are coming in first 10 business days, the nervousness is right at the top. And the extreme examples I would give would be the person who doesn't want to say anything because they're worried about saying something wrong when they're meeting new people. And so they say very, very quiet because they want to be seen as an observer and an absorber of information. And then the other extreme is the person who wants to ask why to everything, which can sometimes come across as confrontational almost, because they're challenging everything all of the time. When you're working with individuals who have been hired into new roles, what advice do you give them around handling that nervousness that causes some of those types of behaviors?
Right. Yes. I think you're right that those two extremes, they exist a lot. If you tend to be more nervous, maybe shy or introverted, I think having something like that canvas that we shared earlier can be really helpful to kind of building their confidence so that they know going in to maybe a meeting that they understand their role, they understand how they fit inside the org, they understand why they've been hired. That having that understanding can really build their confidence so that they can, ask good questions. Yeah, I do believe that one of the best skills a product manager can have is asking good questions. And my advice to someone who feels really nervous in that situation is to remind them that when you're starting a new job, there's no such thing as a bad question, right? Like anything is on the table. You're new to the company, you're new to the role. Ask any question and just know that people are not going to be judging you, that everybody recognizes that you're new and they want to hear from you. They want to hear your voice, and they want to hear what kind of questions that you have. People are there to help you be successful in those early days. And so I think hopefully if you tend to be more nervous or anxious in those kind of situations, understanding that might help you feel more confident. And then the opposite extreme, I've seen this one so many times. It's the bull in the china shop. The person comes in. It's one of the biggest mistakes is that that I've seen people make is they come from another company and they tell people like, oh well, when I was at this company, we did it this way, and I think this really worked, and I think we should do that, right? And they just start to immediately talk about doing things their way without taking time to understand how does the company work. And so, yeah, it's hopefully there's some employees at the company that can have some direct but gentle conversations with those types of new hires to just remind them that, hey, I'm sure you have lots of great ideas, but let's get you onboarded with kind of how we do things, and then we can look for opportunities for you to put your stamp on things. It's that's those two extremes definitely exist more often than not.
I found an analogy through talking to a friend who's a chef actually about replacing people, and I sort of was able to bring it straight back to product management. Using that example that you gave there, when a chef walks into a restaurant, you don't just write the whole menu off. And just say, this is our new menu and this is what we're doing tomorrow. And today's my first day. You come in, you learn the kitchen, you learn where everything is, you learn the resources and the talent you've got available to you. And then slowly over time, you adjust that menu so that there's a transition rather than a change. So I absolutely see the analogy there. Joni,
That's a great analogy. I'm going to steal that because you can really run with it. That's a wonderful analogy. Thanks for sharing that.
Awesome. It gives you an example, a chance to get out to some restaurants and interview some chefs.
Yeah.
Joni, talking about that transition though from one company to another, what's your guidance on sometimes people leave companies for unfortunate reasons, reasons that have negative energy around them, toxicity, bullying, etc. What recommendations do you give to individuals around shaking that off or dealing with that before setting foot into the new business day one?
Ooh, yeah, that is a tough situation to be in. And, I think that it's it's really tough for me to give this answer because I know it sounds very privileged, and I know not everybody can take the time, but I do believe that having a break in between your last job and when you start a new job is very healthy, especially if you left a situation where there was some kind of toxic environment. I think it's really important to you just kind of give yourself a little bit of time to just regroup and remind yourself that, that had nothing to do with you, so that you can bring your best self to that new role. It's, but I realize like it's a tough job market and not everybody has the luxury of being able to take time off. But I know, I've left companies before where it's taken me a couple of months to kind of shake that off. But it, I do believe that, meeting with friends, meeting with your peers can really help. Talking to other people that have been in similar situations can help. And honestly, this is my coping mechanism, but I like to find the humor in things. And I find that once you're out of that environment, it's a little bit easier to look back on it and go, oh my gosh, what were we thinking? So try to find the humor in things, but really, put your best self into that new opportunity and just, try to leave it behind you. I know it's hard, but when you start a new role, you will be busy and you will be challenged, and hopefully that makes it easier for you to kind of leave those old negative experiences behind.
No, so what I'm hearing there as well is for the hiring managers to respect that if he's asked. For I know plenty of hiring managers have had a position vacant for a long period, or the interview process has been very long, and they just want to get the person started. And if the request is there for a 2-week gap, you're actually helping yourself by giving the new hire that space that they've said they need.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Joni, what strategies can leaders use to continue to support?
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Product Coalition podcast, hosted by Jay Stansell. Got questions or want to explore more topics? Connect with Jay on LinkedIn or join the ever-growing Product Coalition community on Substack. Thanks for listening.
Person beyond the initial onboarding period?
Oh, that's a good question. So I would say maintaining those regular check-ins is really important. I believe in kind of that servant-based leadership that, as managers, we're really there to support our teams and unlock their potential. And I believe that regular check-ins are vital to making that happen. So I do think that, maintaining those check-ins are key. Providing continuous learning opportunities. I think that's one area where, especially like things are changing so much. What the way product managers are working today is totally different than we were working 3 years ago. And so I think if you can provide opportunities for that continuous learning for your team and your new hires, that can go a long way towards, obviously not only helping them become the best product managers possible, but it just shows that you're interested in their personal growth as well. And that's going to go a long way towards retention, right? So if you're keeping your team happy and giving them opportunities to grow and develop, then hopefully they're not going to look to leave and go elsewhere. And the other thing I think is just being really clear about what success looks like, so that each person understands, how they kind of connect to that, mission of the company, and they understand the impact that they're having. I think that is something that leaders should be doing beyond those first 90 days with their new hires.
Nice. Thank you. Joni, we had a question in on the comments here, which is how to access the canvas you were sharing. What's the
Oh,
easiest way to
sure.
find that?
Well, we could probably I could make it available through a link that we could put in the comments after the live stream is over, if that works for people.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think that'd be great to
Yeah, happy to share. I just, anything that I can do to help people, either whether they're individual contributors starting a new role or they're managers that are thinking about roles that they might want to hire for in 2025. I think this can be a great tool. And I would also add that this is a helpful tool, not just when you're starting a new role, but it can also be a good tool for those check-ins. If you do quarterly check-ins or maybe a 6-month review, you can use this as a tool to just kind of quickly revisit, like, hey, what did we say were the top 3 things I should be focusing on? And then you can adapt it and evolve it, over time.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Now, before we wrap up today, Joni, I've got something special to finish on. It's what I like to call the parody sponsor. So I've got a parody sponsor video, a minute long here for you. Hopefully raises a smile and gives you and the audience a laugh before we wrap up the episode. So here we go. Here's our how not to do onboarding parody sponsor for you.
I will show you how to get the best onboarding fails of your life. Ready to watch the chaos unfold? First, forget about aligning new hires with your company's culture, mission, and product vision. Who needs that? Just throw them into the deep end with zero context. Confusion breeds creativity, right? Next, skip the structured onboarding programs. Instead, hand them a 500-page manual and say, good luck. Nothing says welcome like a mountain of unreadable text. Early wins? Pfft. Let's aim for early losses. Set impossible tasks with no guidance. It's a great way to build character and resilience, or at least that's what we'll tell ourselves. And continuous growth beyond the first 90 days? Nah, let's just wing it. After all, who needs ongoing support when you can have a revolving door of frustrated employees? So, if you want to create an onboarding experience that's memorable for all the wrong reasons, follow these tips to the letter. Your new hires will never forget their first day or their last. Stay tuned for more expert advice on how to turn best practices into worst practices. Until next time, keep doing everything wrong.
That's so funny. I love it.
It was, producing that was actually gave me a moment to reflect on onboarding experiences that I've been through my career, and ones that I've actually really enjoyed and memorable, and ones that I've definitely not enjoyed and also memorable. So I really appreciate the advice, the clarity, the suggestions, and the wisdom you've been able to share from learnings throughout your career today. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And, and that parody video made me think that, failing fast is kind of a principle that we often apply when we're building products, but it's absolutely the wrong principle to apply when you're onboarding, right? You do not want to be failing fast in your onboarding process. Yeah.
Yeah. Fail the hypotheses, not the people. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Joni, for your time today. For everyone listening in, thank you for your time as well. Hope you've enjoyed this session with Joni Hoadley and myself. If you'd like to know more about Product Coalition, head over to productcoalition.com. Until next time, thank you very much.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Product Coalition podcast, hosted by Jay Stansell. Got questions or want to explore more topics? Connect with Jay on LinkedIn or join the ever-growing Product Coalition community on Substack. Thanks for listening.